Welcome to our next panel where we're going to talk to two Disney legends. I'm going to introduce them for you now in these wonderful introductions that Howard prepared in the vein of our favorite non-Disney podcast, Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal Podcast, which if you don't listen to it, every episode he gives a ridiculously long introduction, which you got a taste of this morning with the Ron Logan introduction. So first up, we're going to introduce our next panelist. Has been a newspaper salesboy, a guest aide, a worm counter, a ticket taker, a ride operator, operations and area manager, project manager, distribution services manager, lecturer, and author with an astounding 48-year career at Disney theme parks, working in a myriad of capacities on attractions including Tom Sawyer Island, the Jungle Cruise, the Disneyland Railroad, Walt Disney World Monorail System, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Space Mountain, Wedway People Mover, Carousel of Progress, Big Thunder Mountain, and absolutely everything at Epcot Center. Starting out at the age of 12, selling the Disneyland news in front of the then two-day-old park, he was later personally hired by Walt Disney to portray Tom Sawyer on the newly opened Tom Sawyer Island, and went on to meet countless celebrities throughout his time at Disney, including Milton Berle, Jerry Lewis, Annette Funicello, Tony Curtis, and Bob Hope. As a member of Club 55, yes, clap for Bob Hope. As a member of Club 55, commemorating cast members who've been employed at Disneyland from its operating year, he's been afforded the opportunity to work for and with many notable Disneyland and Walt Disney World leaders, including Eddie Mack, Bill Sully Sullivan, Dick Nunis, Bob Matheson, Pete Crimmings, Orlando Ferranti, and Norm Durgis. In 2003, he was honored with a window on Main Street in the Magic Kingdom, followed closely by his naming as a Disney legend in 2005. His fascinating memoir, From Disneyland's Tom Sawyer to Disney Legend, The Adventures of Tom Nabbe, is currently available everywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a man who Walt Disney once refused to hire because Walt thought he would run off to eat hot dogs every 30 minutes instead of doing his job, Disney legend Tom Nabbe.
Well, in that case, I'll do the Bob Gurr intro.
I mentioned that intro's longer in my book.
All right, then. This next gentleman needs no introduction, but I'll be forced to do it anyways, because otherwise he'll probably get me in trouble. And here we go. Joining Tom on this panel is an industrial designer, stylist, engineer, author, and raconteur who has designed or styled 100 different objects for theme park attractions, most famously vehicles for almost every conveyance at Disney parks, including the Autopia, Main Street Omnibus and Fire Truck, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, the Viewliner, the Matterhorn, Magic Skyway, Submarine Voyage, Flying Saucers, Adventures Through Inner Space, the Haunted Mansion, Goodyear People Mover, Grand Prix Raceway, the Magic Kingdom parking lot trams, and the Mark I through Mark IV Disney Alweg monorail system. He also makes significant contributions to Disney's audio animatronics technology for the 1964 World's Fair and the Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln figure. In his post-Disney career, he continued to thrill, entertain, and inspire, working on a diverse series of projects for theme parks, movies, concert tours, and Las Vegas hotels, producing groundbreaking large-scale animatronics for King Kong and Conan the Barbarian movie shows, sinking pirate ships at the Treasure Island Hotel, the T-Rex animatronic for Jurassic Park, the film, and the UFO for the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics closing ceremonies, seen on live television by billions of people around the world. That is no lie either. After an accidental meeting with a job placement officer at his alma mater, he began his Imagineering career in 1954 by styling cars for Disneyland's Autopia. Eventually, he would collaborate and rub elbows with a long list of famous names, including Dick Irvine, Roger Broggie, Joe Fowler, Rolly Crump, Herb Ryman, Marty Sklar, Richard Nixon, Steve Wynn, Michael Jackson, Steven Spielberg, Elon Musk, and of course, Walt Disney. He's also an accomplished author with multiple books about the art of car styling, And also his life and career, including Designed for Fun and Bob Gurr, legendary Imagineer, Life and Times, Disney and Beyond. He's also the subject of a recent documentary film, Bob Gurr, Turning Dreams into Reality. And if that's not enough, he's also honored with windows over Main Street in both Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom, and was himself named a Disney legend in 2004. So please give a warm Florida welcome to the man responsible for bringing General Motors to Epcot Center, only to be fired from the project and wed after calling his boss an idiot, Disney legend Bob Gurr.
Are you sure that was all? Oh, boy.
Well, that's for now. I know you got some more stuff in the hopper, so we'll add on to that the next time we see you.
Well, welcome to Walt Disney World, which you first knew as Epcot. So you were involved with this project from the earliest days of Walt conceiving it. So could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I saw this first when it was a jungle, and it was hopeless bunch of sinkholes and one cabin. We were down here in the company plane. We had about 12 of us on the plane, Roy Disney included. And the pilot said, say, before we land, let's drive over to the property. And I was so impressed that they slowed down, put the flaps out, 1,000 feet, and it took us 20 minutes to go around the property line. And I remember looking down and saying, these people down there on the ground, they have no idea what we're going to do to them. I still have the pictures.
I think you'd said in a prior interview that there was not as much enthusiasm amongst some of the folks in the company about getting into city planning versus building theme parks and movies and things like that.
Well, yes, because, building a Disneyland, because we're doing it locally in Anaheim, because it's fairly close to Burbank. But the idea that, number one, we have a jungle which we have to convert into useful land, and then there's this thing called rake and muck or whatever you call it. We have to dig down about 3 feet into the ground, and we have to rip out all this nasty, sharp razor edge grass. We have to dig big holes and build big piles and stuff. We have to make our own lakes compared to the lakes that were here. And that's before we design anything. So it was like about half the budget was just to get the land ready to go.
And they got the model right on the first try, right, with this property?
Well, I would assume so, because what a lot of people don't realize is, we have the utilidors. This is the underground area. When you walk up to the Magic Kingdom, you don't realize that is 20 feet higher than the surrounding land. We were able to make the lake on the east side of the Contemporary Hotel, and that gave us all the earth that we needed to build up to get the Magic Kingdom above the water table. And that way, and then we could plan the utility corridors underneath as sort of an extra to help us build up the land to keep Magic Kingdom from sinking into the water.
Epcot was not so precise, Epcot Center, when they were building those models, because so many hands were in it, I think, over the years?
Epcot, Epcot's a long story. All right, we were all there when Walt was talking about his Epcot. We had a great big, tall 16-foot room, and everybody's talking about it. Walt's describing everything he wants, and then he's gone. And then some years later, the company decides to say, well, we better get going on Epcot. So sort of a private club was set up, which we called the Wednesday Morning Club, and we had maybe 11 or 12 people on this meeting, and it was chaired by Marty Sklar. And to me, it was a very anguishing year of these meetings, because we went from what we last thought Walt wanted, flipped it slowly around so it became a sort of an industrial exhibit that Card Walker, our president, who is kind of a marketing guy, could actually sell to sponsors. So it's a very hard thing for me to describe Walt, I'm sorry, the dream, we just ruined it with our Wednesday morning club, but we got it down to where Card Walker could make a case to General Motors and convince them why they should be there. And he was right, because the minute General Motors said yes, bang, everybody jumped in and wanted to be right on it. So that was a good decision. But I'd like to also observe, how many of you gone over and seen the little circle-rama of what we're going to do to Epcot? You seen that little? Oh, I saw that the other day, and that thing is so gorgeous. So, Walt, I'm going to explain what we're going to do now. So many people love Epcot. It's turned into sort of its own park for an entirely different reason than we had in mind. So, taking off on that direction, we're now going to make stuff that is just going to be joyful and pretty and cute and neat and full of all kinds of charm. I want to live long enough to come back and see that whole darn thing done.
I think we can all agree to that. Before I shift to a question for Tom, isn't there a story about when they were, because Epcot was the World Showcase and what became Future World, wasn't there a story about somebody one day walking in asking, how big is this? How much land is this going to take?
Oh, yeah. Normally, when designers design things, we always design sort of like looking down on the drawings on the table. And we made numerous models of Epcot, just Epcot alone. And it got very, very big. And then we thought, gee, we set up balloons and looked at it. You couldn't even see the other end of Epcot or where it was going to go. So we took a deep breath and we cut it in half, just cut the model in half. And it still looked big, but now it looked like it was missing something. We had another project that a lot of you don't really know or don't remember. Over by the TTC, we had a circular thing called World Showcase, and the idea was every country would have the same width opening, but different length buildings going out the back. That was a fatal error. You don't ask a little itty-bitty country to sit next to a big country, and the big country is not going to have a doorway as small as yours. So that was a fatal error as far as sponsorship. So then we said, oh, well, we'll solve that problem. We'll simply pick that up, and we'll stick it onto the bottom end of Epcot, put a bigger lake in it, and then everybody can build the buildings as big as they like. How many of you knew that history?
You were talking about flying over the property and the mouse and digging through the wilderness to build this place. Tom, you were one of the first applicants to come here in a lead role when the park was going to open. What was it? And Orange and Osceola counties were like wilderness back then. So what was it like to move your family from Southern California to the Orlando region in 1971?
Well, I had never been east of Phoenix. Okay, so that was a major decision. When I interviewed with Bob Matheson to come down here, he really emphasized the humidity and the temperature and that type thing. We did take a pre-move trip in May of '70, and May's a very nice month. August sucks. but in turn, when we got here, lucky the interest rate dropped, so we were able to buy a house up in Pine Hills on the GI Bill, which was sort of nice, and enjoyed that. Orlando basically stopped at 33rd Street. Okay, and you had a little bit of a rundown, and then there was 528, and that's where International Drive is, and it was maybe 3-4 football fields long. Hilton Inn South was there, and I think there was a gas station, and that was it. And then that road dead end into Bay Hill, into the golf course. There was 2 or 3 things. There was a guy up in Apopka that would swallow whole oranges. You could go to Lake Eola and sit and watch the grass grow, and then every once in a while they'd have a sack scramble at McCoy, and that was usually really exciting. But those were the exciting things that went on down here. the people had no concept of what this project was going to be. They thought it was going to be the fair, that they go to every year over in Tampa, and but it's going to run all year long and not shut down, and that's it. And then there's the whole group of people that had retired here that were very upset because the property values started to go up, and their income, their fixed income was impacted drastically, and they didn't care too much for the Disney folks.
There's also a very famous convenience store that is kind of legendary that you frequented. Could you tell us a little bit about Johnny's Corner? Because I feel like there's such little information out there about it.
Well, Johnny's Corner was down at Reeves Road and 535 and Apopka Island. And it was a little country store, and Johnny would cash checks. And all the construction workers would stop there in the evening and have a beer or two. And 7-Eleven built right after, or right before we opened. And that was the most economic based 7-Eleven in the country on the quantity of beer that they would sell on a daily basis. But yeah, Johnny's Corner spent a lot of evenings at Johnny Corner.
One of the reasons that we have these two gentlemen up here, besides being one of the first ones to Florida, is they share one commonality, and that is that they both built and operated the monorail system here at Walt Disney World. So, Bob, could you tell us a little bit about your design work for the Mark IV, which I assume you did here at Walt Disney World, and what your thoughts were about putting that together for transportation?
Yes, the original Mark I monorail at Disneyland, from the time Walt asked me to start it until we gave Richard Dixon a ride on it, was only 8.5 months. Try getting a budget out of Disney in 8.5 months. That led to the development of the Mark II, which was a stretch version, much more improved, different canopy on the top. That in turn led to an all-new design called the Mark III, and as I was starting the Mark III design in the mid-1960s, we learned about the fact that we were going to put a very extensive monorail system into Walt Disney World that would later have a big expansion. So that meant that we were going to have a much higher capacity train. So what a lot of people don't know is the Mark III at Disneyland and the Mark IV for Walt Disney World were designed concurrently together, because basically the Mark IV is a longer version and wider because the beam is wider, but it's essentially mechanically, and the drive system is the same exactly. The bodies are entirely different. Disneyland is wide open because, the climate is very nice. But here we had to have air conditioning. We had to have an enclosed car. So I got a chance to use the most advanced aircraft structure of honeycomb hexcell type structures, all done with custom aluminum extrusions, which meant the bodies would go together without any jigs and fixtures. The thing was almost like a snap-together type of train. We wound up, that was the right thing to do, because over time we wound up with 10 six-car trains. So we have really an incredible sized monorail system part way through. And then, of course, we like to advance the design as we can. So Dick Nunes had an idea about the train. We always like to have people, please remain seated in the vehicle. But then when Dick Nunes painted the picture of it, he says, I don't care if people stand, if it's midnight and it's a thundering rainstorm, we're going to get them out of the park, and they're all going to jam in and they're all going to stand. So redesigned the train to make the roof taller. One of our designers, George McGinnis, restyled the Mark IV into the Mark VI. And it looked about the same. In other words, it was a really good redesign, so it was a standee. So this train now is pushing 30 years, and I get all these questions. I have no answer. It's your problem. You live here. When are we going to get a new monorail?
I don't know the answer to that one, but boy, the last train was just absolutely beautiful. So they do have a challenge to make an improvement to
Yeah,
it.
well, they're doing a nice overhaul. The new paint jobs are looking good. They're doing a really good refurbishment on the inside. So I think, with proper love and care, I think we can squeeze another decade out.
Here's your answer from Bob Gurr.
One of the things that I grew up riding the Mark IVs, and I loved it. So one of the things, and Tom, I'll have you switch over to this because this is kind of an operations thing. For those of you who grew up going here in the 70s, up through the 80s until they brought in the Mark VIs, I think one of the most distinctive things that you remember is as the monorail slid into the station, the driver would come out and push the buttons to automatically open up the doors. But when it was time to go, that person would have to go down the line and slam each door individually. And that sound is just burned into my brain of the slam, slam, slam.
Well,
We had the concept that we wanted to make sure nobody was getting pinched by an automatic door system. So it started at Disneyland. We wanted the operator to close each door, making sure all the little kids, the little toes, the little fingers are in, so they were not getting hurt. But of course, it's a modern day now. We have these nice flush fit doors. All of them usually stay on the train except one. I think one guy. Oh yeah. There's a lot of stories. Yes. Yeah. All right.
You go through that door slamming thing and have a room on the 5th floor in the Contemporary Hotel right above the train station, and that just used to drive people
all day long.
absolutely crazy.
I got a test for you out there. How many of you know that there was one monorail escaped and it was hidden in Georgia for years, and a guy came and got it, and a couple of years ago it was at Burning Man. Does anybody know what Burning Man is? Can you imagine I'm at Burning Man 4 times and I go up there. There's my old friend Monorail Red sitting up there in Burning Man with all these dancing girls and fires. So monorails do have a good life.
Can you tell us a little bit about walking the tracks, Tom? Because to me, that's one of the most fascinating parts of your story. Is so he actually had to walk the monorail berm from beams from time to time.
Well, I think all of you know that U.S. Steel built this hotel and built the Polynesian Hotel, the golf course hotel, and a hotel down on I-4 and the B line called Court of Flags. And all those rooms were built here on the property in DC 6, which was the U.S. Steel building, which is out by the ball fields. Trying to work with U.S. Steel was just an absolute pain. It would take me sometimes 3 and 4 hours to get clearance to come into this building to check the monorail stations. And I just couldn't do that and do my job too. So the monorail beam's 30 inches wide. It's a little wider than this table. And the easiest way to get into the Contemporary Hotel was to walk the beam. And I'd walk up from the TTC into the Contemporary Hotel, check the station out, and then in turn I'd go back down and walk the beam over into the Poly, and that was really quick. Now, if a thunderstorm was brewing, I wouldn't be walking the beam. Okay, there's a couple times I got a little wet, and but that solved my problem of being able to get into the stations, make sure that they were going together right. When we opened, a good portion of the railings hadn't been delivered in a lot of the stations, so we had a lot of ropes and stanchions throughout the building. I think, when I got here, I had the opportunity to go over to Martin, and Dave Gingenbach and Ron Brown were putting the trains together at Martin, and then they'd come over car by car, and then hang them on the rail, and then bring them up into the square roundhouse and put them together. The trains are really interesting, and Bob designed them. I had the opportunity to break them, but as he said, the whole body was aircraft design. The drive mechanisms were pretty much GM.
No, that was all Rockwell standard, completely stock equipment.
Yeah, and then all the electrical equipment was GE Electric.
That was all General Electric stock equipment. We don't invent anything if we don't have to.
Yeah.
We just buy the stuff at the store.
Yeah, and one of the problems that we had is all the beams. If you look at the monorail beams, the ones that are curves on the bottom, those were constructed and shipped here from Tacoma, Washington by rail. And some of them are 110 feet long, pretty long beams, and right towards getting close to opening, the two beams on the north end of the hotel here, the train turned right and the beams went straight ahead. And it was wintertime and it snowed, and they couldn't find the beams to see if they could use them or if they had to be remanufactured.
1 month before opening, the people to do with designing the hotel, architects, they said, we don't like the idea of the monorail going through here. It'll be as loud as a Chicago L. And we couldn't convince them the building will never know the monorail is in it. The agreement was that I operated the company's seismograph, which you could measure different forces. We bolted that down to the deck at the platform for the monorail. And it was Labor Day, and they let everybody go just for 1 day because they were all exhausted. And they said, we want to run the train through the hotel as fast as possible. And they pointed at me and says, you drive. Well, I don't know how many monorail, ex-monorail drivers are out there, but do you know that hole that you go through when you come through it at 5 miles an hour, it's okay? I'm going through there 3 times at 43 miles per hour. Zooming through this hotel. Just unbelievable experience. Seismograph never registered a thing.
Whisper quiet operation.
That's all right.
Well, let's shift on a bit from the monorails to something that's celebrating a birthday this year. It's the 50th anniversary of the Haunted Mansion. And
Haunted Mansion shirt.
and Bob's wearing his Haunted Mansion
Amazing
shirt.
coincidence.
Yes, amazing coincidence. I have 2 questions for you about the Haunted Mansion because I know that's all you need to get going. The first is that facade in Disneyland was there for like 10 years. Agonizing fans waiting to see when it would open. Now, how did that facade get there so long before the ride?
Oh, we had a architectural drafting room supervisor, Harvey Gillette, and he personally wanted to design all of the production drawings for that for the building itself, while the team that was still figuring out what they're going to do. But he had enough power that we approved the budget. He got it built. He got his house all built, and it didn't matter how long it sat. He was happy he had his building up. So that's the source of those questions. But luckily, in the course of that time, when I started the work on the Voyage to Inner Space, came up with a machine we called the Omnimover. The team working on Haunted Mansion said, "Oh, that'll solve our problem of not walk around, make it a ride." So a lot of people blame the Haunted Mansion for being the first Omnimover. No, it was the Voyage to Inner Space with Monsanto that came up with the first Omnimover.
So let's shift over to Disney MGM a little bit. Tom, do you have recollections about the park's opening and your involvement with that?
I'm sorry, Ken.
Oh. Do you, when Disney MGM Studios opened, did you have any involvement in that, or is there anything that you remember about working on that project?
At that time, I was running the warehouses.
Okay, so you would shift over.
But in turn, we stored all the animated characters in there, and we did unfortunately drop Clint Eastwood on his head. And he needed to have some repair before he could be installed in there. That opening, boy, it rained all day and all night on that opening. It was sort of one of the wettest openings I'd ever been through.
And Bob, now this is one of those things that I had no idea until we started to do some research. But some of you may remember an attraction called Catastrophe Canyon. And there is a very famous piece of artwork that I found, and it was of Catastrophe Canyon. But instead of the truck, it was a railroad boxcar that was kind of the star of the center of that. And I always wondered why it changed to a truck. And then I found out because Bob Gurr changed it. So tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, after I left Disney, I was working for a company that two other fellows and I created called Sequoia Creative. And we were doing a little bit of work for Imagineering. And then they brought out some drawings that were complete, full production drawings of a railroad trestle and an oil tank car, and wanted us to bid on building it. And I had a different idea. I asked them to come back, and I said, would you mind if you changed your story? Because we could save you about $400,000. Well, you don't tell Imagineering to change their story if you're a vendor. So I proposed that little kids are not interested in oil tank cars and railroad trestles that collapse. They like semi-trailers and trucks on the highway. How many of them do this to get the guy to honk the horn? I says, I can get that truck with an oil tank or a gasoline tanker, $3,000. It's all run out, and save yourself the trestle. Don't build a trestle. Just use a highway, but tip it out of the sight line. Nobody will ever know that it was supposed to be rails. And I think it's a lot scarier to have a burning gasoline truck being pushed into your face than look at an oil tank car on a collapsed trestle. The look on Imagineer's face that a vendor had told them how to do better stories. It was kind of a testy thing. But we saved them the $400,000. Then, in building all the equipment, they came back and said, would you mind installing the entire show for us yourselves? Wow, sure. Our team came down here and brought all this stuff, and we set it all up, put it all in, took the money, and went home.
And I think it really was a vast improvement for that show, because that was a great moment on the back lot. So
Howard tells a great story, if you've ever heard it, about sleeping out overnight the night before Disney MGM Studios opened on World Drive and then eventually in the parking lot. And he said the whole night we're sitting there hearing explosions.
yeah, we ended up parked so where the cars pull it. Well, you can't pull in there anymore because now they've closed it off for Star Wars Land. But we were basically forced to park before the entrance plaza there. So we were stuck there from like 2 in the morning until 6 in the morning until they finally let us in the main parking lot. And we had no idea what was going to go on with Disney MGM. We saw a couple of models and things, but the fans, there wasn't this thing like today where on the internet they show you, oh, it's going to be this, and here's all the concept art. It was kind of closed. So we sat there, and then all of a sudden an explosion would go off. And we were like, what the hell is that? and we would sit around, and then 15 minutes later, another explosion would go off. And it happened all night long as they were doing cycle tests of Catastrophe Canyon to get it ready for that day. So that was amazing. And then when we finally got to see it, that was the first time I think we really felt real hot fire and real water close up in a Disney attraction. You know, everyone talks about, the fake stuff in Pirates of the Caribbean, but like when you felt that fire, you really felt that fire. And it was a completely different Disney park experience than what we were used to before.
Yeah, usually you see those things at Universal, but we took a hint and says, hey, we can do that stuff too.
One of the things that we'll talk about is one of the things that I ended up doing over the course of time is I have probably, I don't know, how many hours did we transfer? Hundreds of hours of video footage, and I have literally 1,000 or 2,000 photographs from the 80s and 1990s that we're in the process of transferring to put out on the site. And I think what we probably have, Todd's seen the footage. I haven't seen it in 30 years, but
You lived it.
yeah. Apparently, we're probably just like talking on camera, and then all of a sudden the explosion goes off behind me, and I probably jumped like 10 feet in the air. So that'll be coming out soon for everyone to see.
So we wanted to ask you some recollections, really anything that comes to mind about some of the folks that you worked with over the years. Two that we lost most recently, we'll ask about Marty Sklar. Any memories you have about Marty Sklar?
Oh boy, memories of Marty Sklar. Oh, he and I got together in the New York World's Fair on the Ford Magic Skyway, and he has a degree of sarcasm that I have. So we spent lifetimes of snarling at each other in a very polite manner. We got to remember, Marty was a writer from the writing school. I am a guy, the car guy in the mechanical world. But the funny thing, we were like opposite poles, and we got along so good. In fact, in the years before his passing, sometimes he'd be invited to go out and travel and do put on programs. And increasingly, he would take me with him. And I just thought that's the greatest honor you could ever get was when Marty Sklar would be on panels. And then one day he says, no, Bob and Marty are going to go out and do stuff. And then we even wound up being hired by outside speakers bureaus. And in fact, we got sent to Texas for the annual conference of the Texas Department of Transportation. 2 days with the opening night on Super Bowl night with 1,500 Texans with Stetson hats and alligator shoes, all Republicans, so we had to be polite. And they paid us $7,000 each. So Marty, I miss Marty.
Tom, anything on Marty?
Marty would always remind me that he wrote the Disneyland News, and that was what anytime we'd end up in a situation like this, doing a Disneyland show or whatever, he said, Tom, I wrote that newspaper.
That's
so,
right.
He
he
always
wrote
made
it
sure
and you
I
sold
knew
it.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Ex Extensio, did you have some opportunities to work with him on a lot of the projects or on any projects?
Is that for...
That's for you. And
Oh,
then
okay. No, X is an example of Walt would pick people out based upon what he thought you might be able to do. He wasn't interested in what you had done. But inside the studio, he would see what somebody does, and then he's got something else that needs to be done. And in the case of X, X is, background artist, fine artist. And Walt says, we're building a pirate show, and you're going to write the music. I don't write music. Well, you're going to get started and just start writing. If you got a problem, go speak to George Bruns. He'll help you on the keyboard and write the stuff out. You just go do it, and then he walks off. He did that to everybody. He'd give you an assignment you'd never done. And I always remember X as the one that was very reluctant to do it. Guess whose music you hear all the time? Pirate's Life for Me. And he did that as not a professional writer.
Yeah, he's probably, I'm trying to think, he has probably like 5 of the most well-known Disney songs. You think of the Disney, like, oh yeah, that was him, that was Pirates. It's like, it was If You Had Wings. It was, God, there were so many things. He just incredible. I know both of you have Dick Nunis stories because you probably both worked with him. So Tom, I'll start with you because he basically was the guy that tapped you on the shoulder and said, Walt wants to see you. So tell us about starting as a kid with Dick Nunis and then later on your interactions with him.
I didn't hear the first part of the question. I'm
He
sorry.
wants to know about Dick Nunis.
Oh, Dick. Dick was Dick wanted to be a coach, football coach, and he ended up getting a job working for Van France in the training department at Disneyland, and Dick, whatever he asked, you do. No question about it. The other thing is, if Dick stopped talking to you, he lost interest in you. So he was forever, ever pushing you to do better and bigger things all the time. Always kicking you a little bit in the butt to get you going and started. You aren't anybody unless Dick has fired you once or twice somewhere in your career. And Dick made this place go. Okay, Epcot. There was no question in my mind that we were going to open Epcot in October of '82. Dick said we were going to do it, and we were going to do it. No question, all the way through. A fantastic person to work for, and you sort of look, he started out in the training department, and he ended up as a chairman of Walt Disney Attractions and Outdoor Entertainment.
Bob, in your first book, you have a story about Dick and the trams at Walt Disney World.
What?
In your first book, you have a story about Dick Nunes and the trams, the parking lot tram.
Oh, how much time we got? 5 minutes?
Go ahead.
5 minutes? Oh, boy. The reason those trams we have starting a number of years ago are so ugly and so stupid looking is buy my book. It's for sale in the back of the room. It'll explain it. The architects decided to dig a lagoon underpass underneath this little waterway out south of this building and only made it 2 lanes wide and a very steep grade. We didn't have enough way to get people to the Magic Kingdom from the parking lot because we hadn't built the ferry boats yet. So we had to have a tram that would go up that hill fully loaded. And we had one designed, but the company's budget department decided they would go out to the street and bid and get a professional tractor builder who misinterpreted the specifications, and they built this pathetic little tractor, didn't have any power, and they broke down and blew up the transmissions every day. And Nunes looked at me and he says, "We're going to fix that now." So I said, okay, I know what we got to do. We got to do technical stuff on the back of the tractor to decripple it, and it might work. So Dick says, okay, we're going to get a tram load. We're going to put people in it. We're going to put the tractor that you modified, and it's going to go up that lagoon underpass or it's not. Well, Dick went out and got the biggest people, all football players he could find, and overloaded that tram. Put me in the seat between him and another executive. He just glared at me, and that little tractor went up there. It got down to about 3 miles per hour, but it pulled the hill. If you can imagine sitting there with Dick Nunes with a tremendous threat, and he's literally got his arm around you, you get an impression of the power that Dick Nunes has. That was the right man that Walt hired, and that was the right guy all the way through all our parks. That man is so powerful, and it's just, you just cannot say no to that man. You'll die otherwise.
Absolutely.
And if you've, again, I never got to, actually occasionally in the 80s they would still pull out the trams to take people between the Magic Kingdom but so if you go into the Ticket and Transportation Center today, so you're walking through, the monorails are in front of you, and to the left-hand side you would go onto the ferry boat. To the right, there's this little round circular turnaround. And in the very early days of the park, there were 3 modes of transportation that were intended. One was the side wheelers, the second was the monorail, and the third was a tram system. And there's a special little road there called Topiary Lane that would take you by topiaries as you went out, because there was nothing else to look at between the TTC and the Magic Kingdom back then, except for the Contemporary. And the trams would pull in that little turnaround you would get on. It would take you over out onto World Drive, under that little overpass here by the Contemporary, and then over and into the Magic Kingdom where the bus parking is now, in that bus area. And there's a little turnaround right in front of the Magic Kingdom as you are walking into it on the right-hand side, and the trams would pull you up there right underneath the monorail, and you would get out and walk into the Magic Kingdom there. So there are vestiges of that system still in existence today.
Yeah, you go back and look at that and look at the volume that we could haul in an hour. And the term slow close developed was that every day at 4 o'clock we'd do an in-park count, okay? And then we'd figure out what our capacity was on how many monorails we had available, how many trams were available, how many Osceolas were available, and then figure out okay, it's going to take us 3 hours to get everybody out of the park, okay? So instead of closing at 6, we're going to close at 8. Okay, and that's where the term "slow close" came from.
And I love that because all of us have probably been at the park sometime, and all of a sudden this announcement comes on that says the Magic Kingdom will be open tonight until 1 a.m. for your enjoyment. I'm like, wow, that's great. And I never realized it just because they had no other way to get us all back to our cars at the end of the night if they didn't do that. So it wasn't for you; it was for them.
We have time for one more question of memory, and everybody always asks about Walt. You have any memories or interactions of working with Roy?
I didn't have a whole lot of contact with Roy during the construction here. My contact was Walt when Walt hired me, and very truthfully, I don't think that he originally had planned to have a Tom Sawyer on Tom Sawyer's Island. I think it was sort of like the dark rides that you are the character. Snow White isn't in the Snow White dark ride because you're Snow White in the car. And I think that was his same philosophy and concept on Tom Sawyer's Island, that when you went over to the island, you were Tom Sawyer or you were Becky Thatcher, whatever character you want to pursue. But I think my persistence and tracking him down anytime I could and asking him if he was going to still hire me to be Tom Sawyer, I think he made that decision. I don't think they thought I would last more than maybe one summer, okay, but 48 years later, here I am. So, such a deal.
Credit career. Anything with Roy Disney?
I only met Roy once. We had an accounting difficulty. We put a lot of money into the Mark 7 Autopia car for Disneyland, and Nunes seriously needed this newer car, and the company said we can't go ahead with the car. It costs too much, because somehow the accountants had fiddled a bunch of accounting numbers and put somebody else's project on my project. So this meant the prototype cost was too much and could not be spread over the production, and the job stopped. Somebody called Roy over to come over and take a look. We brought a car up, and Dick Nunes is standing there, and all the accountants are standing there. Roy's standing there. And Roy looks at Dick, and he says, "Do you need the car?" "Yes." Roy looked at the accountants. "Build it." Roy could solve a problem with one word.
Fantastic. Well, that's all the time we have for these two Disney legends. But before they exit the stage, Bob has a new book out because his first book is impossible to get. Bob has a new book, Bob Gurr, A Legendary Imagineer, and he is going to be signing copies of it available in the back of the room during our next period and break. And anything to say about that?
What do we got? It looks like about 300 people out here. I only brought 51 books, and I've already given one away.
So he's got 50 back there. It's a limited edition.
Go way in the back and talk to Ernie.
And Tom has a book that he put out several years ago that is available everywhere. So order it online from your seats here today. That's what Amazon's for, right?
Yeah, I brought a couple with me, so
all right. So he'll go back.
I'll be back signing books. So anybody have a book that wants to be signed, bring it back there too.
It doesn't even have to be his book. He'll sign it.
Okay. My book's also with his book on Amazon, $21.95, tax, shipping, and all that. But $20 here signed.
There you go.
That's a deal.
All right, thank you to these two Disney legends. We love having you here. And we hope to have you back sometime.